So we left off in the last segment with this model of the seven deadly passions, seven deadly sins that we derive from our fear. And as we encounter these various fears, we talk ourselves up. Remember, we have pride, and this breeds pride, comes out as far as lust, using other people for our gratification, manipulation, gluttony, using stuff instead of people, sloth, which is a sort of negative manipulation, leaving the dishes in the sink because you can get somebody else to do it if you leave them there long enough. And then on the other side of it, envy, hating other people for what they have, greed, which is holding on to things, not using them yourself, and then finally anger. We're enraged that people don't do things the way we think they're supposed to be done. And I think y'all remember Vasily pointing out that this is at its core, it's a form of self-idolatry. We make an idol around the self. And these things become the means by which, if you remember again that awareness chart, these are the things that we use to avoid dealing with our fears, and particularly the fears of pain and our shame. So when we are struggling internally with our sense of shame over things that we've done, our worries, our concerns, we go back into numbness by numbing out with these various passions. The passions become a source unto themselves. And when these go overboard and the will becomes broken, then you have addiction. So it was kind of a despairing moment when we left. So now I want to show that there is a positive side. That if we were to take God and put God into the formula, what would happen?
Joy.
Instead of fear, so we're just going to basically replace this chart with the notion that God is going to help us. Let's go back to that awareness chart again, okay? Here's joy, God. Down here is our old friend, Mr. Death. Hi. Non-existence, nil. And here is pain. But before you come to pain, you have fear. Before we're stuck here, we're stuck here. So if our fear is about encountering our pain, what is it that we need to have in order to be able to go through our suffering, our pain? We have to have hope. And the church gives us hope. The church says, yes, this pain can be overcome. It can be defeated. How is it defeated? Well, it's defeated by, I'm going to move this a little bit closer because I'm running out of chalkboard. I need a bigger chalkboard. Father, next time I come, can you have a bigger board for me? Or I need to learn to write smaller. So instead of, when we encounter the threats of the world, instead of experiencing them in terms of them being threats, we are supposed to experience them with what? Faith. And again, I want to emphasize what I was saying before, is that faith is not, it is not blind faith. The Orthodox Church does not believe in blind faith. The last thing that we should rely on in helping people is, trust me. If you have to say that, you're wrong. Never, ever, ever appeal to your office in order to get people to believe what you have to say. This is important. This is important in all aspects of ministry, by the way. If you're afraid that your people are going to ask somebody else and get a different answer, you should think twice about that information. I am certain, every time I speak to one of my parishioners, I'm absolutely certain that what I tell them is the same thing that if they called my bishop and asked him, same answer he would get, or any other sane priest, and I want to emphasize the sane part, okay? Because there are priests out there that say some wacky stuff, you know, get on the internet, you'll find them. You'll even find some bishops on the internet, they say wacky stuff. But the consistency of the church is a big part of, you know, who we are. We're not supposed to really be, you know, proving ourselves through our opinions. It's that we know our truth. You know, we come to seminary not so that we can dream big, but it's so that we can absorb our tradition and communicate it. And actually, and this is kind of the part that's where it gets kind of dicey, is trying to communicate all of this in a consistent manner. So, you know, some priests try to do the Lone Ranger thing, because remember, the bishop comes once a year. You know, he comes once a year, and so, you know, you could get away with a lot of stuff, you know, because what the bishop doesn't know won't hurt him. Except if you have a parishioner who has the bishop's number on speed dial. And I remember when I first got to my parish, I've actually had this happen a few times, it's kind of funny. You know, the bishop and I talk. I tell him what I'm doing in my parish. I told him I was coming here. You know, the people will test. So they call the bishop and say, Father George is doing X, Y, and Z. And the bishop says, yes, I told him to do those things. That kind of scares him. What? Obedience? But that's part of the consistency. But when you get down to that, trust me, bad thing to say. People say, I don't believe what you have to say, Father. I said, check it out for yourself. We have the witness that our faith works, you know. This seminary named after who? St. Herman. He's just down the hill. People say, why should I believe in that Orthodox stuff? You say, look at him. He believed in this faith, and he became this beautiful person. He followed the teachings of the church. He was a monk. He learned him. He came here and he demonstrated it. And because of his example, because of his demonstration of the faith, we believe it. It's very, very, very simple. It doesn't take eloquence. It takes a good example. And so if we give people this example, they will have faith. They will have faith, and that faith will not produce pride, a false narrative of who you are. I'm a very good driver. Remember the whole thing about that? Yeah, I'm a very good driver. Crunch. I don't need this. What I need is the truth. I need to know the truth about myself, the truth about the problems that I'm dealing with. So the truth then right-sizes the real challenges that lie in front of us. Let's say, for example, one of the fears that you're struggling with is your acceptance by your peers. We were talking about that with teenagers. They want to be accepted by their peers because it's really important. Why is that important? Why is it acceptance? You know, people join in down in Los Angeles, people join street gangs because they want that acceptance. Because they think that if they're accepted by their peers are going to help them. They're going to back them up, right? You get into a tight situation and your friends are going to come to your rescue, right? Like if somebody pushes you around, all of a sudden, boom, you call in your posse. That's what they say down there. Then what happens is, you know, because you're part of a gang, you have to do the things that the gang says. And then you get arrested. And what happens to your friends? You know, you're not supposed to rat them out, but they don't come and help you. I was on a jury for a murder trial, and there was the guy who was in the street gang. He murdered a man and took his car, and he was telling everybody. He didn't tell him that he actually killed the guy who owned the car. He was just telling him that he had bought the car. So his friends in his gang said, "Oh, you bought the car? Let us drive it." So they drove it, and what did they do? They ran a stop sign in front of a sheriff's deputy, and the sheriff's deputy stops them, and then after he gets the guys who have warrants, and the guys who are wanted, and everything else, the rest of them who could get kicked loose, he said, "Well, the car looks like it's stolen." He said, "Oh, our friend says that he bought it." So they called him up and said, "Dude, you're dead if you don't come down here and bail us out." And that was how, you know, the guy ended up arrested and all that. But his friends ultimately left him holding the bag for the murder. Even though he murdered this guy as part of his activities within the gang. And usually what happens eventually with guys who are felons who go through this stuff is they begin to learn that their friends really aren't going to help them. Their friends are not going to do their time for them. And actually a lot of these people will get used. And so that acceptance by humans that they were so afraid to do without ultimately did them in. The problem is that by the time they figure that out, they're lifers. Instead of pride, we have humility. And what humility says is, God will save me. God will come to my aid. So I don't have to fight. I don't need my friends. I don't need, my homies. I will have God as my defender and my helper. So, you have humility. And also, you see, with that humility, with that faith, the things that we're afraid of, automatically they go away. We become afraid of other things. We become afraid, let's say, of going off the path. There are some fears that are good to have. Fear is kind of helpful. If you're going to play in the street, you should be afraid of getting run over by a car. But we have to have the right kind of fears. So now, humility breaks down into two other virtues. Where before we had lust, I'm going to switch colors so you can tell the difference. No. Let's try blue. Instead of lust, where we use people for our own gratification, the first thing that we have is respect. We respect people. Now, why do the scriptures tell us that we're supposed to respect people? Because they're made in the image and likeness of God. But we respect that people are also not made, other human beings are not made for us to use. Now, again, when you're talking about dysfunction in a family where there is alcoholism, where there's drug addiction, everything else, there's a whole lot of manipulation. And there's a whole lot of disrespect. Because, we think that we need to have this or have that, have things our way. And we lose this. But, respect also is the acknowledgement that, for example, showing proper respect to people is not using them and treating them according to who they are. Treating them as they really are. All of this stuff is getting back to reality. Not this false stuff moving away from existence, but it is moving towards the truth. It's based on truth. And respect breaks down. Before we have gluttony. Now we have moderation. We use things the way they're supposed to be used. Now, this gets into the issue about, well, can an alcoholic or an addict ever go back to using alcohol or drugs? Like, social heroin use. Just a little bit on weekends. Oh, Father, it's not like I really want to pass out, and get locked in the bathroom like I used to. I just want to be a social heroin user. Little weekends, just take the edge off it.
Wow.
Remember the biological damage that our sins can cause. It's a big factor here. We want to remember that in abusing alcohol or abusing a drug, you're changing yourself biologically. And we believe in the resurrection, all that can be healed. But the question I always ask people who want to go back to social drinking is, do you have a lot of bad memories from your drinking? Oh, yeah, it was really bad. Why would you want to go back to that? I have bad memories of certain places, and I don't want to go back there. Why would you want to go back? So some things are moderation, as we figure that, the way I look at it now is, the safest thing you tell people is, well, we're all supposed to moderately drink throughout our lives, and you did all of your drinking all at once. So the most moderate thing you could do is kind of lay off the stuff. But in other terms, remember the problem of if you are with an addict, if you're addicted, that you can get addicted to more than one thing because you're medicating all of these problems. We're not supposed to abuse things at all. As we need to remember is that we have to be moderate. You have to continue, and this is part of what you will do in checking yourself or checking another person who you're trying to help through their drinking problem. I think I told you the story about the guy who was in the gym for taking 5 aerobics classes a day while he was trying to stop drinking. That's not moderation. That's immoderate. If the person is going off the deep end some other way, you have to be careful. So in counseling people, and you say, yeah, I haven't had a drink in weeks, Father, and everything. That's great. Ask them a few more questions. Ask them how things have changed. How has your day changed? To find out what's going on here, because they may be abusing something else. And instead of sloth, we have responsibility. We take care of the things that we're supposed to take care of. Like if my roommates and I had been responsible in college, we would have set up some kind of way to rotate who's going to do the dishes. We would not act irresponsibly and slothfully by trying to get somebody else to do it. Now, we have envy. Envy, the hatred of, here, the hatred of another person for the good things that they have. What could be the opposite of envy? For envy is hating what the other person has that you don't have. Charity. Okay.
Contentment.
Who said contentment?
Content.
Vasily, you should be teaching this class. Gratitude, which is this, basically what he's saying. I just have a different word for it. But gratitude. Being content with the things that God has given you. Remember, God is in here. Being happy with what you have. Again, we go back to the saints. Look at the saints who lived in hardship. The ascetical saints. They lived in great hardship, and yet they were happy. We all remember the story of Saint Seraphim of Sarov, right? Kneeling on a rock for 1,000 days. He was beaten and going through all of these things, and yet he encountered people with joy. When you go to a monastery, how do they greet you? They offer you coffee, they offer you hospitality, and they show you joy. We have a temptation in our church because we have, an ascetical lifestyle, and sometimes we can get tempted into thinking that what asceticism really is about sort of being unhappy. Glum. Because I am serious. But that's not it. That's not it at all. If we are beholding God, we can't help but be happy. We can't help but be joyous. And part of what that joy is really about is being grateful for all the things that you have received. I know enough about the traditional cultures here to know that expressions of gratitude are an important part of life, right? When you hunt and you get the animals, you're grateful to the animal. You're grateful for everything that God has given you. Again, the temptation before is to think that I can stand on the shore and worry the fish into my net. Right? It's delusion. Whereas the realization that the fish are in the net because of God, when you bring that net in and it's full of fish, who do you give thanks to? Part of what it destroys a young person, in fact, is when they're not taught gratitude. They assume that they're supposed to have everything because they don't work for it. But, we don't. This is a real stickler here where I'm from, because we don't raise adults anymore. We raise teenagers. We assume that they're too immature. They have adult bodies and they have adult hormones, but we say, well, we can't really expect them to get along, and so we give them, and then we tell them that remember the McDonald's motto, you deserve a break today. Your life is so hard, you poor thing. Here, have a Big Mac. About 14 more of those, you'll feel great. But gratitude says, I'm glad that I have these things. They're not just automatically, I don't deserve them. I don't deserve, I know for sure that I don't deserve to be here. It's a gift. Being with all of you is a gift. I'm grateful for it. I will thank God the rest of my life that I was here. So it's a source of happiness, of joy. We can't, this is the thing is, you can't have gratitude and to be unhappy. Try it. I really like all of my stuff. Everybody likes me.
People use it as a form of therapy. Sit down and make a gratitude diary, every day for a week, and the rates of depression go down for like 6 months.
Sure. There was a Greek Orthodox priest told me, he says the one of the best marital counselors he had in his church was this little old woman who used to clean up. She was a widow. She was, typical, yaya with a black dress, clean up around the, and he said whenever he'd get a phone call from some woman in the church, says, I'm thinking about getting a divorce. He would always make sure that the day that she was coming would also be the day that this woman would be cleaning up. And then what he would always do is take a phone call and let Yaya handle the situation. and it went something like this. This is Yaya would say, come in there and, oh honey, how are you? Oh well, not too good. I want to divorce my husband. Really? He drinks. No, he doesn't drink. He have a girlfriend. No, he doesn't have a girlfriend. He doesn't cheat on me. He don't have a job. No, he's got a job. He's well employed. He gambles? No. He beats you. No, he's never really. He beats the children. No, he hasn't beaten the children either. Why do you want to divorce him? He's a perfect husband. You give him to me. I will take care of him. These women needed, as we all do at times, to sit down and to look at what we have and be grateful for it. You're all in seminary now, and there's plenty of things that come up that annoy us, and say, that you could really become unhappy about. That you could really get, bound up if you forget what an honor and what a privilege and what a joy you have. This right here, okay, is absolutely indispensable in our salvation. Again, returning back to the alcohol and drug user, there's not a lot of this. And in my experience, many people get sober when they get in touch with this. And but again, it's different from person to person. I had a spiritual awakening getting a DUI. So that was part of like, I need help. Oh, this is terrible. There are, I knew a guy, and he had like 4 of them just in California. And he actually left another state because he had too many DUIs in the other state. So DUIs were no problem for him. He could do them all day long. They didn't do anything. But what caused him to awaken that there was a problem was his wife left him and took his daughter. And he realized what a gift he had in her. What his drinking was costing him. And so that process of being awakened, we've been talking about throughout all this. This is a key, and it can often happen by people coming into contact with loss, and simply realizing what they have that either they've lost or is in jeopardy. Okay. Now, instead of greed, we have generosity. This is the ability to give to others with the realization, again, that God provides all things. That God is the source of everything that we have that is good. This is extremely difficult because of our natural inclinations, at least unnatural, natural, our fallen inclinations are to hold on, to hoard, to keep. Whereas the realization, and this is again something that is modeled in the saints, their ability to give, even when they had nothing. Saint Seraphim, the guys came and took his stuff, right? There's images of other saints would follow after the robbers and say, "Oh, you forgot something. Here, take this too." And this is so generosity, and the last one. What could be the opposite of anger?
Joy.
Happy, no?
Peace.
Think about, we're angry at other people.
Quiet.
Okay. Compassion. When somebody annoys you, you can make one of two choices. Say, "You're supposed to do it this way." Or you can realize that that person who's doing whatever it is that annoys you, that's probably the best that they can do. I mean, think about I'm driving on the 405 freeway and some guy cuts me off, going 3 lanes and goes on the off-ramp. And I say, "This crazy jerk." And I, tell him he's number one and yell and scream and honk, because doesn't he know who I am? Didn't you see me here? So you drive a Kia. Who'd want to pay attention to you? Not that big a deal, but I'm a big deal to myself. Take it on the other side. When you see that person doing this crazy maneuver in the traffic, you realize, this guy's a bad driver. He could hurt himself. He could hurt somebody else. That would be a terrible tragedy. I should pray for him. Now, I'm going to self-disclose and admit right now that I really need to pray for more people, because I get angry. But it's my sin. It's not theirs. It's my sin. I'm the one, ultimately, who's making the mistake. I'm the one who's choosing, at this point, to forget God. And instead of loving my brother and forgiving my brother his trespasses, his debts, his sins, I'm holding on to them and I'm becoming poisoned by them. So coming through this blockage of pain requires a vision of God. And what the beginnings of all recovery starts with, when there is a bottom, the person experiences what is usually called a bottom. It is this point where they begin to ask questions, whether this cycle that they're usually trapped in between numbness and pain and back to numbness is really working for them. And they also realized that no matter which way they pull that gear shift, the car's not going in the direction that's supposed to be going. And then usually there is people have like a narrative of the way they think of themselves and the way they think that things are supposed to be. And they can do a lot of rationalizing for how come they're doing one thing but preaching another. There comes a point where the rationalizations just aren't working anymore. There is, in fact, with what happens with some people is that progress towards pain and fear, but they usually are able to duck back into numbness. They get stuck for just a moment. I've had men describe it to me where they were drug users and all of a sudden the drug stopped working. And the guy, in one case, he overdosed. He gave himself a fatal dose, and he said he was stone cold sober. It just stopped working, and it was that moment where he realized something has changed, something is different. This is, we can't predict when this is going to happen. We just don't know. But it happens. What we as, let's say, family members, those who are not the ones that are the addicts, this path back down towards numbness, this is a we often call this the medicating part. I'm trying to medicate my pains. What we're not supposed to do is participate in the medication of the other person's pain. So if they're using and they come to you and they say, "Hey, I need some money for rent." I get this in my parish once a month. A phone call from somebody says, "Yeah, oh Father, life has really been difficult for us, and my family, we had this with this woman. She came and she says, yeah, our van broke down, and we need some money for a mechanic and everything else. And she had her kid with her, and the kid says, but we drove over here." You could tell she just really wanted to like wrench that kid, but I knew what was going on with her. I could smell it. I'm not going to participate in her going back into this death. So I said, we have a guy in our church who happens to be a mechanic. Let me give him a call. He'll take your car in, and we'll pay for it. Oh no, couldn't you just give me the money? Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, they want the money. Well, they're not going to get it. I was offering to repair the car for free, but she'd rather settle for $50 in cash. What is that about? This, but and again, the warning about this shouldn't stop us from charity. Okay, sometimes you'll see somebody sitting outside and they're begging. Go bring them some food, and you get mixed results. I had one time I grabbed a bunch of chili and I gave it to a guy outside. And it was kind of a neat reminder. He said, "Oh man, this is my favorite kind." And thank you so much. And as I left, I was kicking myself that I didn't buy him a case. Because here was somebody who was being, that's what we want to have in charity. That's really charity. There's a real need, and there's a real offering. But too often what the addict will do is the addict knows about that kind of thing, so they just know to put the front down. except when you get some of those guys, like the ones that are on the beach in Venice, California, who put the sign up that said, you know, money for beer. And they actually make a lot of money. Yes?
How about those guys, they say they want food, and then you actually get a trash, I mean not a trash bag, but a store-bought, you know, the plastic bags you fill up with a Gatorade, a sandwich, you go bring the food to them. And so they come over, they grab it, but they run back and hold up their sign.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, there's more where that came from. Well, somebody was noting it in where we're from. The signs have changed. The signs used to say, "We'll work for food." Now they just say, "Yeah, food."
There's no work.
There is no work, but even when there was work, the signs had changed in the last 10 years. People just know, hey, you know, why lie? I just want your cash.
They don't clean your windshield anymore?
And,
Yeah, windshields gone.
well, you have to remember, I'm from Los Angeles. Dirty windshields. We don't have enough rain and snow and stuff to mess our windshields up. Besides, we all go to the drive-through car wash. No. But yeah. So anyway, so this in trying to approach God, we encounter fear, and it is specifically the fear of pain that we must get through by having a vision that God is with us. Now here we have the byproducts of fear and the sins that come out as a result. This, however, these things that are coming out of us here are not our efforts. This is what's hard. Again, as Christians, is we can again forget some of the very basics of what we're taught in the church and lose sight of what's happening. See, these sins, these passions, come to us automatically. The alcoholic doesn't wake up and say, you know what I really need to do? I'm really terrified about my life, and so I think I will become an alcoholic and I will stay drunk. He doesn't do that. The person who, let's say, becomes addicted to internet porn doesn't say, you know what I really want to do? I want to sit in front of my computer and look at dirty pictures for 2 hours. We never think that way. These are natural byproducts of this. It's like automatic. In the church, we call these things fruits. You look at Galatians 5, the end of it, there are these fruits of the Spirit. These virtues don't come to us through a self-will. We don't will ourselves into being virtuous persons. We don't say, if you St. Paul says, the things I do, things I don't want to do, I do, things I want to do, I don't do. That the will that propels us along this line is broken, doesn't work anymore. We've gotten the gears all out of pattern. But by having the vision of God and living in this faith, we get these fruits that naturally come forth. They proceed out of us. We do these things unconsciously to some degree. I mean, not that we don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to be a really good person. I mean, it's good to think that way, but a lot of times it just doesn't work that way. If you're with St. Paul says it doesn't work that way an awful lot. However, these things come out when we allow these fruits of what? The Spirit, which is God, the Spirit of God, comes and He dwells within us. We become first, before we receive the Holy Spirit, we are still influenced by Him. People who seek after God all begin to receive that influence. This is why we can see people who are not Orthodox, but they manifest many of these gifts. Remember, actually, if you think about it, you think about the Adam and Eve in the garden and everything else, and how we are supposed to be with God. We're made in the image and likeness of God. These things actually are what? These are attributes. These are attributes of God. God is faithful. He shows up when He's supposed to. He does what He says He's going to do. God even respects us. Look how Christ treats His apostles. At times He kind of makes fun of them. There's a lot to make fun of. There's a lot to make fun of. But he actually calls them friends. He deals with them with kindness. He gives them a great calling. All of these things are a description of how we are supposed to be as icons of Christ. But these only come ultimately when we turn our will and our lives over to God. We come under God's influence. And this is why the basis of a recovery program is always foundationally has to do with a loving God. There cannot be a program for really overcoming these things without God. Because what tends to happen is with programs that are, let's say, not God-based, is what they're going to work on is they're going to work on adjusting your sense of pride. Most of the time, what counseling is about, and certain types of, not most counseling, but certain types of counseling, certain types of therapy, is about tweaking somebody's pride. Because, the falsehoods of the pride are, your pride can go anywhere of any different levels. There's the pride of Napoleon, and then there's the pride of, the guy who's, a good, mechanic, right? There's different stages to that. So if your pride is way out of whack with who you are, if you think that you're Napoleon Bonaparte, and really you're Joe torn apart, and it's not going to work. So what they say is, well, let's just bring your pride down a few notches. So you're not Napoleon anymore. You're just General Patton. You bring it down a little bit, but you don't really become humble. You don't really become completely humble, because the truly humble person, this is the thing we know about humility, is humility, very often appears as weakness. And that's one thing the world doesn't like. And a non-God-based program is not going to teach you about being weak. We are weak. We as Christians, we know our weaknesses. But it's okay to be weak because of who He is. But if you eliminate this, you have to be strong. You have to be powerful. You have to have pride. So in closing, because I know we need to wind this up, you know, again, we'll get into some more things about tomorrow about identity and how we operate also as a community. Remember, I was studying the thing about white, you know, pride. You could say you have brown pride, and that's a good thing. But you say you have white pride, and you know somebody's cross is going to get burned. You know, we often say we're proud. Like you could say, you know, I'm proud to be Tlingit. You know, I'm proud to be a Luktik. I think the better word is to be, and I think that it kind of means that most of the time when people say it, is to be grateful. To be grateful for who we are. Grateful for the, you know, the traditions, the identity, and things that we've been given. Not that we react to these things out of some kind of pride and condemn the other person, but say, I'm glad that I've been given the gifts that I've been given. We have to teach people not to think of themselves as superior, but to realize that you know each and every one of us has been given special gifts, and so we'll get into more of that process tomorrow. So.